police brought him into court like just another vagrant. No one knew. If the judge hadn't recognized his face, America would have lost another forgotten hero to the cold, without a word, without a name. If you're watching this, and you believe that sometimes just remembering someone's name can save a life, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if you want more stories that almost slipped through the cracks of history, subscribe. Let's make sure they're never forgotten again. That morning, the city hadn't quite woken up. A pale fog hung like unspoken grief between the rooftops, and the wind cut through the alleys in sharp, glass-edged gusts. Outside Courthouse 12, a patrol car pulled up to the curb and idled. The door opened with a reluctant creak, and a man stepped out, slow, brittle, like each joint had a story of its own. Cuffs clinked around his wrists. Not tight, just tired. His jacket, an old military surplus piece at least 2 sizes too big, drooped from his shoulders like the years he carried. It had patches, some torn, some stitched. The name tag had faded to a ghost. His boots, cracked open at the seams, flopped as he walked, soles barely holding on, as if they too had nowhere else to go. Inside the building, the lighting was harsh, flickering fluorescence that flattened color and kindness alike. No one looked at him for more than a moment. One clerk whispered to another, smirking. Another street sleeper pulled from behind the diner, probably drunk, probably high. He didn't speak, just looked ahead with the dull, steady eyes of someone who's already been judged in 1,000 ways that never involved a courtroom. The bailiff nudged him forward. When the clerk finally asked for his name, he raised his chin, just barely, and said in a voice that had been quiet for far too long, "Elijah Ward, Echo 12. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words fell like a key in a lock, turning something no one else could hear. Across the courtroom, Judge Evelyn Doyle froze. Her pen hovered mid-air. The voice, the name, the unit, Echo 12. Her eyes flicked down to the thin folder just handed to her. A standard arrest report. Loitering, trespassing, 3rd offense. But below that, a line stamped decades ago. Operation Crimson Dust, Rava K, 2004, Urban Recon, Echo 12, survivors, 5 of 12. Something old, long buried, stirred in her chest. She blinked once, twice, but her hands didn't stop trembling. On the defendant's bench, Elijah sat with both feet planted square, like habit. Not defiance, not surrender, just stillness. The kind only learned by men who've stood through worse. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. But in the stillness of that moment, in the way the light hit the edge of the metal chain on his wrist, something shifted. And though no one else could see it yet, Evelyn Doyle had just realized that the man sitting across from her wasn't just another vagrant waiting for judgment. He might have once saved her family. She said nothing at first. Her fingers moved automatically, flipping through the arrest report, but her eyes weren't reading anymore. The courtroom noise dulled to a hum. Distant voices, pages shuffling, a cough somewhere in the gallery. But Evelyn heard none of it. Only that name echoing in her head like a bell struck in a long, empty church. Elijah Ward. She hadn't seen it in decades. But there it was, staring back at her from the line item. Crimson Dust survivor, injured, presumed disabled, discharge, Echo 12. She remembered the way her younger brother used to talk about Echo 12 in his letters. How they were dropped into the most hostile part of the operation. How the team was chewed up in less than 4 days. How only 5 made it out. He never said much more than that. Just one name. Ward. Across the room, Elijah was silent, his frame slouched beneath the oversized coat, shoulders rounded not just from age, but from the slow erosion of 1,000 cold nights and too many days with no one speaking his name. His hands were folded, loosely, calmly, like a man who had stopped expecting anything from the world, except the cold. The prosecutor, a young man with sharp features and a sharper suit, stepped forward. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clipped. "This is Mr. Ward's third citation in less than a year. He's been found sleeping in restricted zones behind businesses. We recommend a no trespass order for the Central District and 30 days of community service." The judge said nothing. "A no trespass order," the prosecutor continued, "would protect local establishments and discourage further encampments." But Evelyn's voice, when it came, sliced through the room like a wire pulled taut. "Mr. Ward, do you have legal representation today?" He looked up slowly, not startled, just aware. "No, Your Honor," he said, his voice rough with disuse. "Public defenders in another courtroom. Would you like to make a statement on your own behalf?" He took a breath, not deep, like even that cost too much effort. "No excuses," he said. "Just trying to stay warm." It was the way he said it, not apologetic, not bitter, just a fact, offered plainly, like someone reporting the temperature. The judge tilted her head, voice calm but pressing. "Any reason you chose that particular location?" He paused. A flicker, almost imperceptible, passed across his face. "There's a kid who works in the back kitchen," Elijah said. "Leaves food out sometimes. Quiet kid. His dad served in Echo 12. Didn't make it back." His eyes didn't move from the table, but for a second, his hands tightened around one another. Just for a second. The silence that followed was dense, not awkward, but full. A weight had settled in the air. That's when the courtroom doors creaked open. A man in an immaculate gray suit walked in, briefcase in one hand, scanning the room with the precision of someone not accustomed to being late. He moved to the defendant's table and set the briefcase down. "Your Honor," he said, "Matthew Chen, representing Mr. Ward. Apologies for the abrupt appearance. I've just been retained." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Retained?" "Yes," Chen nodded smoothly. "Very recently. I'd request a short recess to consult with my client." The judge studied him, then Elijah, her face unreadable. 15 minutes, she said at last. "This court is in recess." She stood and disappeared into her chambers without another word. Back at the table, Elijah leaned toward the man beside him. "I don't have money for a lawyer." "You won't need any," Chen replied softly, not looking away from the bench. "It's already been taken care of." "By who?" Chen smiled, just faintly. "The person who owes you more than they can ever repay." Behind the heavy door of her chambers, Judge Evelyn Doyle stood still. The room was silent, except for the muffled throb of city traffic far below. Her breath trembled as she reached for the bottom drawer of her desk, the one she hadn't opened in over 15 years. Inside was a worn folder, its corners soft from time and fingertips. She drew it out gently, like handling a memory too fragile to disturb. There was a photograph on top. Her brother, Lieutenant Thomas Doyle, in full dress uniform, arm draped casually around her shoulder. They were both smiling, she barely out of college. He, fresh from officer training, his future stretched wide before him like a road with no shadows. Underneath the photo was a letter. She unfolded it with practiced hands. The creases had grown thin, and the ink had bled in places, but she knew every word by heart. She didn't need to read it, but she did anyway. "Eve, Don't worry about what you see on the news. Rava K's rough, yeah, but I've got someone watching my 6. Guy's name is Ward. He doesn't talk much. Looks like he's already seen the end of the world and came back to warn the rest of us. Yesterday, everything went to hell. I got hit. Nothing fatal, just enough to knock me flat. I told him to leave me, told him to get the others. He didn't even hesitate. He ran into the open, dragged me back behind cover, and laid down fire until the evac came. He probably saved half the squad. He's the reason I'm still writing to you. She pressed the paper against her chest. 2 weeks after that letter, Thomas was gone. A roadside IED, no warning, no goodbye. At the funeral, a Marine approached the family, said he was with Echo 12, said Thomas saved lives, said there was one man in particular who got him out alive just weeks before, but Evelyn had never caught the name. The man left before she could thank him. She tried afterward, called bases, wrote letters, reached out to the VA, but records were sparse. Echo 12 had been scattered, classified operations, soldiers discharged under closed files, many without addresses, without closure. Elijah Ward had vanished, until now. A knock pulled her back. She set the letter down and wiped her eyes before speaking. "Come in." Matthew Chen stepped in, concern written across his face. He was one of the few people who still called her Evelyn, a longtime family friend, once a junior partner at her late husband's firm. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. She gestured to the photo. "It's him, Matt." Chen stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Ward?" She nodded. "That's the man who carried Thomas out, who wrote himself out of history." "Does he know?" "No," she said, voice tight. "And even if he did, I don't think he'd believe he mattered anymore." Chen exhaled slowly. "Evelyn, you can't preside over this case. There are conflict of interest rules." "I'm aware. So what are you going to do?" She straightened, composed herself with effort that came from decades of practice. "I'm going to make sure he's not erased. Not this time." There was a pause. Then Chen asked gently, "You ever wonder what happened to him all those years?" Evelyn nodded. "I asked the VA last year when I saw his name flagged in a cross-check. They told me he was discharged with a severe TBI and PTSD. Lost track of him after that. No stable address. Benefits were denied over insufficient documentation." Chen's jaw tightened. "Let me guess. Bureaucratic hell?" "Worse," she said. "A clerical error. Wrong date on his injury report. One line, and he lost everything." Chen shook his head. "So what now?" Evelyn looked back at the photo. Her younger self, beaming in a world that no longer existed. "Now," she said softly. "Now I try to give back a fraction of what he gave us." 15 minutes later, when Judge Evelyn Doyle re-entered the courtroom, her stride was as composed as ever, shoulders square, gaze level, expression carved from granite. But to anyone watching closely, her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the papers on her bench. Only a trace. The kind of quake that lives in the bones, not the muscles. Matthew Chen stood beside Elijah Ward, who hadn't moved from his seat. The older man sat in silence, back curved, fingers interlocked loosely in his lap. He didn't look around. Not at her, not at the prosecutor. As if presence itself had become something optional in his life. A quiet courtesy he extended when required, but never volunteered. Judge Doyle cleared her throat. "Mr. Chen," she said, voice calm, "has your client decided how he wishes to proceed?" "We request dismissal of all charges," Chen replied. Mr. Ward was not trespassing for personal gain or misconduct. He was sheltering himself from sub-zero temperatures. The cafe staff have confirmed he was not disruptive, and the cook had given him permission to sit near the kitchen vents. Implied consent exists. The prosecutor opened his mouth to object, but Evelyn raised a hand. Not stern, just tired. "I have a few questions for the defendant," she said. She turned to Elijah, her voice now shifting, not the voice of a judge, but of a person. "Mr. Ward, your file lists combat service in Operation Crimson Dust. Is that correct?" Elijah blinked. A pause. "Yes, ma'am," he said slowly. "Echo 12. We were in Rava K, 2004. Her eyes locked on his. "Were you engaged in an operation on March the 17th of that year? West Ridge supporting a supply convoy?" A shadow passed across his face. "Yes, ma'am. That was the day the ridge went hot." "Can you describe what happened?" He hesitated, swallowed. "We were escorting a convoy. Ambush hit the second vehicle. RPGs, small arms fire. One of the officers tried to pull a wounded comms tech back into cover, got clipped in the leg and dropped." His hands gripped each other now, tighter. "I ran out, pulled him behind a wall, took a few rounds in the vest, kept his head down till we could call the birds in." There was a stillness now, the kind that stretched between words and wrapped itself around the room. Evelyn's voice, when it returned, was barely more than breath. "What happened to that officer?" Elijah's eyes drifted somewhere far away. Not to the room. Not to now. "He made it out. We all did that day. Least the ones left standing. I heard later. He got back to Germany, then redeployed. Didn't come home the second time." His voice cracked on the last sentence. Not loudly, but like something inside him had given way after holding too long. In the gallery, an older man in a weathered Marine Corps League jacket stood abruptly, his voice cutting across the quiet. "That's him," he said. "That's Sergeant Elijah Ward. I was in that unit. He saved 6 of us." The bailiff moved to quiet him, but Evelyn didn't stop the outburst. She didn't even blink. The prosecutor cleared his throat, clearly rattled. "Your Honor, while Mr. Ward's military record is commendable, I respectfully submit it has no bearing." "It has every bearing," Judge Doyle interrupted, voice firm now. "And we will not dismiss that context." She set her gavel down, not in anger, but with finality. "This court will recess again. Bailiff, please keep Mr. Ward here." As she stood to leave, she paused, something she never did, and looked Elijah Ward directly in the eyes. "When I return," she said quietly, "there are matters beyond these charges we need to discuss." Then she left the bench. Elijah didn't move, but for the first time in hours, maybe years, his face showed something that could almost be mistaken for fear. Not of prison, not of the cold, but of being seen. Back inside her chambers, Evelyn Doyle let the door click shut behind her like the ceiling of a vault. She didn't sit. Instead, she walked to the far corner of the room, to the narrow window that overlooked the alley behind the courthouse. Down below, a loading truck reversed, its beeping echoing faintly through glass. A pigeon flapped uselessly near a ledge slick with last night's rain. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple, not from pain, from memory. Then, with deliberate motion, she crossed the room and reached for her desk phone. The line she dialed wasn't one she used often anymore. A direct number, restricted. A voice answered on the second ring. "Colonel Grant Alvarez speaking." "Colonel, this is Judge Evelyn Doyle." A pause. "It's been years," he said. "I wasn't sure you still had this number." "I didn't forget it," she replied. "I need a favor. Now. I have someone in my courtroom. Elijah Ward." The silence that followed was different, heavy, intent. I've been trying to track him for over a decade, Alvarez said. His name got flagged in a batch of legacy files during the Veterans Reconsideration Initiative, but he was off the grid. No address, no benefits, ghosted. He's here, Evelyn said, facing trespassing charges. No home, no counsel, no idea anyone remembers his name. She heard the colonel's exhale, clipped like someone pushing down fury. I'll be there in 10, he said, and I'm not coming alone. She didn't ask who would be with him. She only said, bring the citation, bring everything. When she returned to the courtroom 10 minutes later, she wasn't alone. 3 men followed her in step. Their presence shifted the air like a weather front. One wore full dress uniform, Colonel Alvarez. Beside him, a master sergeant with a jaw carved from granite, and a younger corporal holding a polished wooden case like it contained the ashes of history. Elijah Ward stood before they even reached the bench. He didn't mean to. His body moved before his mind caught up. Reflex, muscle memory born from years of snapping to attention at the scent of brass and dust. The room stirred. Murmurs cascaded through the gallery. Evelyn sat, removed her glasses, and placed them on the bench. What came next? She didn't say as a judge. I need to disclose a personal connection to this case, she began. 21 years ago, my brother Lieutenant Thomas Doyle served with Echo 12 during Operation Crimson Dust. He was wounded in action on March the 17th, 2004, during an ambush near Rava Cay. She turned her eyes toward Elijah. The man who pulled him from the fire was Staff Sergeant Elijah Ward. A wave passed through the room. Not applause, not shock, recognition. The older Marine in the gallery stood again, voice rough. It's true. He took 2 rounds pulling the lieutenant out. Would have died with him if the evac had been a minute late. Evelyn nodded, the weight of years in her breath. 2 weeks after that incident, she continued, my brother was killed by an IED, but those 2 weeks belonged to us. We had them because of Elijah Ward. Her voice faltered, but only for a beat. I tried to find you, she said, but you were gone. Records lost, benefits denied, and you disappeared. She looked toward the colonel. He stepped forward. Staff Sergeant Ward, Alvarez said, his voice steady, rich with command. You were listed among the unresolved commendation files. After recent declassifications, your actions that day have been reassessed. New intelligence confirms that your intervention not only saved Lieutenant Doyle and multiple squad members, but also disrupted an ambush meant to destroy the entire convoy. He gestured to the corporal, who opened the case. Inside gleamed a deep blue ribbon, and hanging from it, the Navy Cross. One breath, then another. Elijah stared at it like it didn't belong to him. There's some mistake, he whispered, almost apologetic. I was just doing my job. No mistake, the colonel said. Only delay, and it ends today. Then, from the back of the room, a voice rang out, strong and clear. Attention on deck! It wasn't military protocol, not here. But those who recognized it stood anyway. One by one, the silver-haired Marine, a man in civilian clothes with unmistakable bearing, another with a cane, tears streaking his cheeks. Then the young prosecutor, uncertain but unwilling to remain seated. Within seconds, the entire courtroom, defendants, spectators, clerks, rose to their feet. Elijah didn't move, not at first. He stood in the middle of it all, still in that fraying coat, eyes wide, lips parted as if to protest. But nothing came. He had no uniform left. But at that moment, he didn't need one. Because the room had already remembered who he was. As the echoes of the call to attention faded, the courtroom held its breath, not out of duty, but reverence. Elijah Ward, standing among them, was still. Not frozen, not overwhelmed, just still. Like a man who'd been moving through a storm so long he forgot what it felt like to be dry, to be seen. He didn't salute. His arms stayed at his sides, but something shifted in his posture, a quiet recalibration. His shoulders drew back just slightly. Not pride, not bravado, recognition. It was as if the weight of invisibility had been lifted by the simple act of others standing up. Evelyn Doyle leaned forward. "In light of these revelations," she said, her voice hushed, "all charges against Staff Sergeant Elijah Ward are hereby dismissed, with prejudice." She struck the gavel, not to end the proceedings, to mark something that should have happened years ago. The room began to breathe again. The colonel stepped aside, and the young corporal gently closed the wooden case, not because the moment was over, but because it had already said everything. As the room began to clear, Elijah remained behind, silent, unmoving. Then a new figure stepped forward, a younger man in a plain black coat, eyes rimmed red but steady. Caleb, the cook. He didn't speak at first, just walked up to Elijah and held out his hand. "My dad served in Echo 12, he said. "He used to talk about a guy named Ward. Said if I ever met him, I owed him everything." Elijah looked at him, confused. "You're Brooks' kid?" Caleb nodded. "He never forgot you. He just never knew where to find you." "I didn't want to be found," Elijah murmured. "Maybe," Caleb said, voice low. "But I think part of you hoped someone would look anyway." There was a pause. Then Elijah reached out, slow, deliberate, and shook his hand. Behind them, Colonel Alvarez stepped forward once more, holding a tablet. "Sir, we've located your discharge paperwork and corrected your status. You're now classified at 100% service-connected disability. Full benefits. Retroactive to your separation date." Elijah blinked. "What does that even mean?" "It means housing," Alvarez said. "It means medical care. It means back pay. It means we don't lose you again." Elijah said nothing. His lips moved, trying to form words that didn't come. Then Matthew Chen appeared beside him. "Our firm will make sure the red tape doesn't trip you again," he said gently. "We've already filed the petitions. You won't be alone in this." Elijah nodded, slowly, like a man still afraid to believe. As the last few people filed out, Judge Evelyn Doyle descended from the bench. She didn't call for silence. She didn't put on her robe. She simply walked across the floor and stood in front of him. Her voice was soft, but steady. "My brother said you told him something when you pulled him behind that wall." Elijah looked at her. Her eyes were wet now, but unwavering. "You said, 'No one gets left behind, not while I'm breathing.'" Elijah's jaw tightened, just a twitch. Evelyn's voice cracked finally. "Today, we return the promise." Then she reached out and touched his shoulder. Not like a judge, not like a hero to a hero, but like a sister, closing a wound. 2 weeks later, Elijah Ward stood inside a one-bedroom apartment, one he still didn't quite believe was his. The walls were plain, the mattress creaked, the heat buzzed quietly through the vents. It wasn't much, but it was warm. On the wall across from his bed, a single frame had been hung. Inside was the Navy Cross, flanked by 2 faded purple hearts, and a dog tag with half the numbers rubbed off by sweat and sand. Matthew had somehow tracked down the box, bought back from a storage auction. Elijah didn't ask how. He didn't want to know what it had cost. A knock at the door. He opened it. There stood Evelyn, no robes, no bench between them, just a woman with tired eyes and a small box in her hands. "May I come in?" she asked. He nodded. "Sure, though it's not much." "It's enough," she said. They sat awkwardly on the second-hand couch. The silence between them didn't press. It just waited. "I brought something," she said, handing him the box. Inside, wrapped in linen, was a stack of letters. "These are from Thomas," she whispered. "He wrote to us every week. This one mentions you." Elijah took it with shaking hands. The paper was thin, folded twice, edges rounded by time. He read, "Mom, Dad, don't worry about what they're saying on the news. We're safe. Mostly. We had a scare yesterday. Would have gone south if not for my NCO, Ward. He pulled me out when I told him not to. Told me no one gets left behind. Not on his watch. He's the kind of Marine I want to become." Elijah's voice broke on the last line. "He was a good officer," he said after a long moment. "Too good. Young. Brave in a way that got you killed." Evelyn looked at him. "After Thomas died," she said softly, "I applied to law school, started the Veterans Court, housing programs, all of it, because of what he wrote about you." He didn't speak. She leaned in. "There's something else you should know." She took a breath. The day Thomas died, he volunteered to lead a mission targeting an insurgent group that was ambushing aid convoys. He said in his letter, he wanted to be the kind of soldier you were, that your example made him believe in purpose. Elijah sat very still, then looked away. His voice was low, nearly a whisper. "I thought saving him might have only bought him time to die." She shook her head. "No, you gave him time to become who he wanted to be, and you gave us 2 weeks we never would have had." They sat there, in the quiet, the past between them. The furnace clicked softly. Outside, snow had begun to fall, slow, drifting, as if the sky too was trying to let go. After a while, Elijah stood, walked to the frame on the wall. He looked at it for a long time, then said, not to anyone in particular, "After all those years on the street, I thought I was gone. Thought no one even remembered I had a name." He turned back toward Evelyn. "But someone did." She smiled, just enough to hold the grief back. "Yes, someone did." And in that small apartment, in the soft hum of winter, something long broken quietly began to heal. Because sometimes honor doesn't need a parade. Sometimes. All it takes is being called by your name. If this story touched you, tell us. What name do you think the world must never forget? Leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe. Because no one should be left behind.